Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 2 of Everyday podcast on how to make our lives okay every day with transactional analysis. And here from our home studios, well, not necessarily our home studios, but it looks like it's our home studios with Jason Brennan and Alexi Beck. And today, the topic of our podcast is.
You tell me. The parent ego state. So strokes in action.
I thought you were referring to our audience. You tell me, audience, what we're talking about today.
That'd be brilliant
Exactly.
if they knew. They're ahead of time. I love that.
Oh, that would be awesome. But today we're definitely going to be talking about the parent ego state and the stroking from the parent ego state, which is an interesting topic in itself and requires a little bit of a recap. First of all, what is stroking? Second of all, what is parent ego state and what types of parent ego states we have? So this is what we're going to cover at the beginning before we move into the whole interesting world of stroking from the parent ego state.
And of course, the audience know all of this because they've been listening to the podcast and watching on YouTube. So I'm just going to refresh again, even though they've all been watching it. I know, and you know that they've been listening and watching. So what is a stroke? Let's start there. So a stroke, the kind of terminology that's used in transaction analysis, it's very much related to transaction analysis, and the definition is the basic unit of recognition. So what's that mean? So it's to do with recognition. So when we're giving or receiving a stroke, it's always to do with recognition in some way. And of course, we'll look at how that breaks up, what type of recognition in a moment. And today we're looking at recognition, particularly from the parent ego state. So previously we were looking at what are ego states, and we know that the three main ones are the parent, adult, child, and the energy that comes from them. So how do we look? How do we sound from any particular ego state? Now, in particular, the parent very much relates to our parents or the people who influenced us when we were growing up. So we can look and sound like these people unconsciously. We can actually be using the exact same words that they used unconsciously. But sometimes we become very, very conscious of it. Like if we become parents ourselves, we realize, oh my God, I sound exactly like my dad, and do I want to do that? Or do I want to put my spin on it or use my voice a different more? And of course, this plays out in all relationships. So we fluidly move into our parent, child, and adult ego state throughout the day, whether we are at home with our family, whether we're in work, whether we're giving a presentation. So there'll be different times based on how we're interacting with the audience that will move through adult, parent, and child ego state. And the key here is to be aware of it, because then we can choose which energy we want to bring, what type of language we want to use, be more considerate of the kind of impact on who it is that we're talking to. And I think today, Ollie, when we look at the parent ego state and the different strokes, we will definitely be considering what's the impact
Oh, yeah.
on the other person when we say or do that.
Exactly. And I think whenever you think about parent ego state, or when you talk about parents or child or whatnot, you don't really think that there's an impact on work, but there's a huge impact on work. And I can't wait until we go into that a little bit later. Also, one thing you wanted to talk upon, which we didn't really touch upon in the previous episode, was the conditional and unconditional
Strokes. Yeah,
strokes.
that's right. I
Yes.
held off for this episode in particular because the parent ego state is very often does it through conditional and unconditional strokes. Now, so I'll slow down and let's have a chat about strokes. So when we're stroking ourselves or other people in either consciously, so intentionally, or kind of unconsciously, where it just comes out, we're usually giving recognition in a couple of different types of ways. So the most straightforward one being verbal and non-verbal. What that means is if I'm stroking somebody verbally, I'm saying something, hello, how are you? Good to see you, right? If I'm not, then I'm making a gesture in some way with my face or my hand, or I'm giving some sort of a look, right? So that's verbal, non-verbal. And then, of course, there's positive and negative. So again, I think we all know what that looks like and sounds like. So a positive positive verbal stroke would be, oh, I really like how you did that. Now, this then brings into this new idea of conditional or unconditional. So what did you do or what did you not do? So I really liked how you did that. So that's a positive conditional stroke because it's whatever the person did that I liked that I'm giving them a positive stroke on. So it's based on their behavior.
Right.
Now, when it's unconditional, that's when it's not really about their behavior, but it's made about them as a person, which can be very, very powerful in both ways, both positive and negative. So if I said to somebody, oh, I really like you, that's a positive, unconditional stroke because it's about you, the person. It's not about who you are, what you do, and it's about you, the person. Equally, if I say you're an idiot, it's a negative, unconditional because it doesn't give the person any clue as to what it is that they're doing or not doing. That you like or don't like, and therefore, how the heck do you change it? How do I make myself not an idiot so that you like me more? So it's quite curly, but really important to understand because when it comes from the parent ego state, it can be very, very powerful because our parent ego state is made up of the people who influence us, so it carries kind of a gravitas, a weight. What do you think of all that, Ollie?
One thing, and this is great to understand, that there's the unconditional and conditional stroking, and in a ways of sometimes think, and they can be also positive, negative. They can be verbal and nonverbal, I guess. And there's a whole mix of that, the matrix of how it looks like. I was wondering when you were talking about the conditional and unconditional stroking, how does that relate to feedback?
Yeah, and when I was thinking about this podcast, I was intentionally wanting to separate out kind of useful feedback that you can give somebody, particularly in work, but not just in work, personally, where it's very much based on what it is they're doing or what it is that they could be doing, which would be very much from the adult ego state. We'll dive into that, I think, in 2 episodes away. So what does it look like when you give feedback or praise or acknowledgement from the adult? That's very different from the parent ego state. First of all, the parent ego state will have a different tone, but often it's not necessarily about what the person is doing or not doing, or if it is, there's a judgmental element to it, which is not there in the adult ego state. So the one thing I guess for people to take away today is when you're in the parent ego state, there's a judgment going on somewhere, which means if there's a judgment going on somewhere, it's not really okay.
Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling.
Yeah, that's the clue. So it's kind of not okay behavior when you're judging. Even if you're judging in a kind of a positive light, it just carries a different weight, a different gravitas, and therefore will have a different impact. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that does resonate. I think I really wanted us to separate these two things as to given there's unconditional and conditional stroking from the parent ego state, and feedback is completely different. And that does, the difference is the judgmental element and the tone by which is being said. Because we've all heard the tones from parents or parental figures where it kind of the voice goes deeper or there's silence involved and a lot of pauses, which kind of makes it feel, ooh, I've done something wrong.
Something gets a bit sterner. Hang on, I can feel the tension. There's something going on here.
For
and
sure.
I'm sure in this, when people are listening to this or watching this, they'll start to hear their parents or their managers or something in their head. The teachers, teachers who were kind of a bit heavy-handed with them in some way in terms of giving feedback or not giving feedback. But I'm gonna put a bit of a caveat in here. Let's not judge ourselves for when we notice that we might be doing it.
Ooh, that's such a beautiful way to put it, Jason.
Because if we move into that,
we have to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah. It's good to know the stuff, become more aware of it, but don't give ourselves a hard time about doing it because we all do it and we will do it. It's about just being conscious of when we do it and maybe minimize that. So if we move into the parent in our own head, we might be giving ourselves a whole lot of negative, actually critical or controlling parent energy or information or questions.
Mm.
Because that's the one we didn't talk about, Ollie. Do you want to talk about the two different sides to the parent? I don't think we've raised that so much, have we?
No, I don't think we've dived into it. No, I think the two poles of the parents, right? So it would say the two characters in the parent ego state would be the nurturing parent and the controlling parent. And whilst those words already mean a lot, I think, to everyone, when you say
Yeah,
nurturing parent,
yeah,
it kind of already brings up something. And when you say controlling, it also brings out particular feelings when you say just the word controlling.
yeah,
Um, they all have two sides to them. So that both medals have two sides. They all have a positive aspect and a negative aspect towards them generally. So over nurturing might not be as good as we think it is, as well
yeah.
as not nurturing enough can also have a negative impact. And same goes with controlling parents. So where I remember you saying this, the word must or should is a
Mm,
characteristic of the controlling parent, right? So that's where there's a lot of rules. There's very strict structures going on there. So that would be more towards the controlling parent. How would you differentiate the controlling and the nurturing parent?
yeah, I think I think you when you reflected there, just even on the words, I think you're spot on because the word nurturing, it does allow us to kind of relax a bit. It just feels a bit easier going, yeah, and often implies maybe more strokes, more kind of softer recognition in there. Now we're going to look at some examples of positive and negative nurturing parent.
For sure.
Whereas the controlling critical, I mean, poof, once you hear critical, oh, get ready, something's something's coming at you. It does have that different energy. It's a bit sterner, it's a bit harder, makes us maybe a bit more tense, a bit more worried. I know, a very good example of this in work is when people are kind of thinking about their performance appraisal conversations. All of a sudden, they
Mm.
get quite tense just with the idea of it, which means there's a whole lot of critical controlling going on in their head already that they're getting prepared that this is not going to go good or I'm going to hear some stuff I don't like or. So it's actually real, but it has different energy. But there is a positive and a negative to the controlling critical parent, which we'll look at. And you and I, we had a bit of research to do to try and find, because we often talk about the movies, this stuff playing out in the movies, and we had a bit of a hard time, right, trying to find some good examples of positive nurturing conditional or unconditional strokes or negative controlling conditional unconditional strokes, right? But I think
For
we came
sure.
up with a few just to give share a bit of light. Do you want to dive
I
into
think
some of them?
I would love to dive into some of them, and just for the audience to understand, the the difficult part was not necessarily finding the quotes, but it was balancing between the motivationalism of those quotes and actually them being a stroke or an acknowledgement or a praise, be it negative or positive. And sometimes that wasn't as easy to find as it was, yeah, as you would think. But yeah, there's a few. I'll just start from the list from the list that I got here. Funnily enough, starting with more of the negative pieces is,
Mm.
"What can't you be more like your sister?" And that's a quote from Little Women.
Yeah, why can't you be more like your sister? So what are we saying there? So it's a stroke because it's about the person, right? It's a type of recognition. Why can't you? And it's a comparison. Be more like
Mm,
somebody else. In this case, your sister, implying to a degree your sister's really perfect or is really great about your sister that you're not.
mm.
So it's not a great feeling. And I think most siblings have at some stage maybe felt a bit of that, right? What?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I definitely can say, and this is, I can say it with a smile on my face now. But again, having an older brother who excelled, who was really good academically at school, inadvertently I'd be compared to him, and not from a perspective of, oh, you should do much better than you're doing now, but it's like, look at your brother. Like, he's a great person to look up to, and I understand it now. But then it was like, oh my God, I want to be closed away from that.
And we know this happens because, like again, the listeners at the moment might be pinging off in their head.
Sure.
If they come from a family of siblings, that they might be, yes, I remember I was kind of told that, or there was an implication. in some way. Why can't you do it like so and so does? Or it's like, oh, so that's definitely
Yeah.
a negative. If it's not mentioned about what they're doing,
Hmm.
behavior, then it's unconditional. If it's mentioned about what they're
Oh.
doing, then it's conditional. That's the only difference there.
And would this be, how would you say that this is a controlling or nurturing parent?
It could go either way depending on the tone of voice,
Okay.
actually. So it could be negative nurturing parent.
Hmm.
Why can't you be more like versus why can't you be more like? So,
Wow.
but without a doubt, the person receiving it got the message.
Mm.
So the tone and look makes a big impact. I'd say in this case, probably nurturing. I just have a feeling it's maybe a little bit nurturing because it's not hard.
Mm.
You know.
But it's great to know that the tone can change the ego state, basically,
Yes,
where
or
it's coming from,
aspect of the ego state, if you want to
aspect
drill
of the
right
ego
down. Yeah,
state.
yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, how about any quotes that you might have, which you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, so this one, it's not a quote that I've picked up from a movie, but it's one that kind of comes to my head, and it's an interesting one. So this would be positive, nurturing parent, and it'd
Okay.
be unconditional, right? So it's not about what a person's doing; it's about who they are. So you're perfect just the way you are. Now, a lot of people might
Mhm.
think, "Oh, isn't that nice?" Isn't that a lovely thing to say? Be careful, because there's a judgment in there around perfection, right?
Right.
Right. It also might be giving the little person or any person kind of a free reign. They can do whatever they like. It doesn't matter what they do. They're perfect.
Mm.
Right. And ironically, I've got a song a little bit later on, if we get to it, that might highlight this. So when we say something like perfect, we're moving into a particular territory that's not that good, because it's not. I would say
Wow.
it's not okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, makes total sense. How about we do one more quote each,
Yeah.
and we move into how we can actually use it in everyday life.
Yes. Perfect.
So one quote that I have is actually, this was a tough one to find, although there's a lot of quotes from this person on the internet, from movies and from comics and from whatever other mediums. It's from Alfred from Batman. And this would he would be here more of a positive controlling parent. And the quote starts off as "You're not a creature of the night, Master Bruce. You're a man, and as the man, you have the power to choose your own destiny."
Right. Where would you ping that one as?
So I'd say it's a positive controlling. It could be nurturing as well.
Could be.
Could be. I guess again, when we talked about the tones of voices, it depends on how it will be said. But I think in this case, it sounds more as in controlling, in terms of positive controlling, as in you have the right to choose, and you have that ability to do that,
Yeah,
rather than a very
I'm
generic.
totally with you there, but it does edge towards the controlling, because there's something in there that it's implied that you need to do something. Do you know what I mean? You
Right.
need to change. You need to.
An implied
Uh,
action, so to
yes,
speak.
it's not
Mm.
specific because it's about being a man, but it's implied. To be a
Right.
man, you should do something. Or whatever. So it's subtle, but it's positive, right? It's definitely not overtly negative. But again,
Sure.
some of these things just shows it can be a little bit confusing. What's actually being said? What am I supposed to do with that?
And the great thing about it is that if you just read it out, it's not always easy to understand because you don't know
Yeah,
the tone of voice it's been said. So if the tone of voice is
absolutely.
assertive, it could be the controlling parent. While if it's more soft and kind of low on the end, bassy kind of voice, maybe it might be a bit more nurturing parent.
Yeah, yeah. I am just thinking of the controlling, and that's often the one that we will most recognize because it has the
Right.
kind of higher impact. I mean, that's why we remember it more. Like if you remember, we were talking about this in a previous podcast session, which is, you know, you'll equally remember the teachers you liked and the teachers you didn't like, even right down to
Ooh.
their names. But the teachers you don't like, you'll remember them more powerfully because of their intimidation, or you didn't want to, there was real experiences that you felt. Okay, so if I look at kind of positive, critical or controlling a particular parent, it might be something like, if I was you. So already I'm saying it's about you, but actually I want you to do something. I'm going to compare you to me on some subtlety. If I was you, I'd X, Y, and Z, right? Because that's probably the best way to do it. So it's it's putting this pressure on the other person in a very kind of a covert way, which means do it this way, and that will please me.
Right.
So
Mm.
it's definitely not adult, right? Because it's a little bit convoluted. And I got one from I've actually got two more before we finish off on the quotes. This one's actually from Back to the Future, and it's I would say it's negative controlling parent, and it's definitely unconditional. So he's an idiot. Comes from upbringing. His parents are probably idiots too.
Wow.
So right there, it's negative.
There's generations
That's
generations
right.
of unconditionality. Yeah.
Right. It's saying, there's a problem with you, but I don't fully blame you. I blame your parents too, like that. But the song I was going to sing, and it has to do with the kind of the nurturing parent one I said earlier about you're perfect just the way you are, which lets kids off the hook. See if you can spot what movie this is from. It's a line from a movie. Are you ready?
Okay.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we did not rehearse this, and
No.
you might hear that I'm a little bit hoarse today, so I don't know how good my singing will be. But let's see. Here he goes. Who do you blame when your kid is a brat, pampered and spoiled like a Siamese cat? Do you know that one?
Okay. I do not know that one. No, that's going
Oh,
to be new for me.
it's one of my favorites. It's from the Oompa Loompa song from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka. Who do
Right.
you blame when your kid is a brat, pampered and spoiled like a Siamese cat? Now, it could be my
Wow.
rendition means he didn't.
But I didn't know the song. I didn't know the song.
Thank goodness for that. But effectively, what it's saying is, he's spoiled and pampered. That's the
Mm,
that's the the put down there, right?
right.
And you can hear parents say this. You'll say, "Oh, you're so spoiled, you get away with everything you do," and that's very kind of negative, and it is a
Mm,
stroke a child will feel.
right.
I mean that it's a bit of a trapped one because it's like, well, hang on, it's what you're doing that's causing this. Like
Right.
if you're telling me that I'm spoiled, well, then who's that fault
Who's
there? You know what I mean? So it'd be kind of convoluted. So it's an interesting one from the song. But what about how does this play out? Like in terms of how can we use this in everyday life?
you know what? I'll just put in one more movie reference there,
Oh,
and
okay.
just the second that you mentioned Oompa Loompa and kind of this phrase from the song, Harry Potter immediately came to mind
Oh, yes,
with
yes, yes.
just a lot of images from the way he was treated by his foster parents, by his
Yeah,
uncle and aunt, and how their real kid was treated by them. So
great
that's
example.
a great definition there of both nurturing parents and controlling parents to others. Right, but you know what? I think it's a great segue to what we're going to talk in next. And one of the things that really helped me at my job was the introduction to the parent adult child model overall, and understanding things that we talked about in season one was that these are all energies that could be really, really useful in everyday life,
Mm.
in your personal life and in work life. And I think what helped me as a manager, and this is why it was difficult at first, was not to focus on the feedback aspect, right? So because immediately when it comes to mind, oh, the positive thing out of what comes out of this is the availability to bring great feedback to my team. But I think in this case, understanding the balance between the nurturing and controlling parent has really, really helped in my job. While I think, personally automatically skewed more towards the nurturing parent,
Mm.
And for example, it was difficult for me to demonstrate some sort of control or bring in some sort of structure, which I felt was not natural. And it helped me understand that finding a balance means that as a manager, I would need to bring that structure. I would need to bring, that sometimes even criticism towards everyday meetings. And that's what needed to happen. And it did happen, and it's still happening. It's a journey for sure. And I think for me, it also helped in understanding the phrases that I actually say and what their effects can be. Because as we said, a phrase that I say might not mean a lot to me, but it might mean the world to someone else because of a word that can trigger them. So kind of being aware of that and being aware that what I'm saying might be, or the tone I'm saying it with might be perceived with a certain amount of judgment. And sometimes that's even okay. But as long as it's done intentionally, not to hurt someone, but on the other hand, it's done intentionally to make something go forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that what has definitely helped on kind of balancing the controlling and the nurturing parent is with the controlling parent, it has allowed me much better to build expectations with my team. So this is what I expect from you as not as a parent, but as a manager. This is what the job expects from you. The organization expects from you. What I expect from you in the next 3, 6, 12 months.
Yeah. So naming some of the targets, the goals, the expectations, as you said, as part of the gig. Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
We're here to perform, right? Absolutely. And again, when I mentioned earlier, when reflecting on stuff, it's not like this. It's not to blame or judge ourselves. But as you were saying there, Ollie, this stuff's important, especially when giving feedback in any way, to slow down and reflect on what am I trying to achieve here? What's the impact on the person? What's the language I want to use? How do I want to kind of set it up in a way that's productive? You know what I mean? So just that little moment to slow it down makes all the difference versus diving into it. And of course, we can dive into it, because life's busy, and all of a sudden we're giving feedback, and it's coming from our critical, controlling, negative parents. Like, oh no, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. And you touched on something lovely there, which we'll all have our own personal different bents, towards each side. So when we're in our parent, we might feel more comfortable in a nurturing parent and less comfortable in critical controlling. And vice versa, somebody might be strong in their critical controlling and not so great at the nurturing. So by using this model, we can start to bring more balance. And if somebody's over nurturing, then they might find it difficult to have those essential critical conversations. You know what I mean? To highlight some stuff. Equally, if somebody's being too critical controlling, they may be underdoing the nurturing, and they probably that might undermine the relationships being developed. So they probably spend some time there, getting to know their staff a bit more. For me personally, I know, because I had a very strong male influence from my father, and if I go into my parent, often it would end up over there when I was growing up in the critical controlling. And I've worked strongly at the opposite, being more nurturing, slowing down, being conscious of tone of voice and look, because my father had quite a stern look, which I can mimic very well. So but to be aware of the impact of if I'm doing that. So again, all of this is up to play with and try out, and that's the invitation here today, right? Just become more conscious and see what happens.
All right. Listen, before we wrap up this episode, first of all, I want to acknowledge both of us, and this is a stroke to both of us, that we're a little bit under the weather, but we still managed to pull through this. But before we wrap up, what are we going to talk about next episode? Because I think it's good to understand the continuation of what we're talking now and what we're going to talk about next episode.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I'm conscious of my nose being blocked. It's that time of year, ladies and gentlemen. It's January, so it's a bit chilly, and there's a few bugs going around. So I appreciate that, Ollie. But this episode being on the parent can be a bit heavy. Well, next episode, I'm very much looking forward to, because it's strokes in action from the child ego state. So we all know that in the child ego state we can have a bit of fun, and I think you and I, Ollie, we really enjoy some of the child fun. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into the strokes from the child ego state in the next episode.
Ooh, nice. Listen, I had an idea here. I'll close up, but you tell me which ego states, which controlling or nurturing parent should I read? Should I kind of deliver this from to our listeners and viewers?
Which we haven't planned this, ladies and gentlemen. So
No,
I was thinking,
at all.
hang on, do I need to guess? You got to do something I need to guess. So now I'm under pressure.
You can just you could brief me to close up in a particular ego state.
Because I know you're very good at, as you said, nurturing parent. So try a nurturing parent stroke that's positive to the listeners.
Oh, a nurturing parent stroke that's positive to the listeners. Okay, here goes. Unfiltered, take one, and here's how it's going to look like. Dear viewers and listeners, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of OkEveryday, where we talked about the nurturing and controlling parent strokes. And Jason and I are really happy that you have come to the end of this episode with us. And if you like this video, I would strongly urge you to press that like button and share some of your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in any of this at all, whatsoever, and you're as ideal as you are as our listeners and viewers, please click that subscribe button and we'll keep you informed of every OkEveryday episode that is coming towards you. In any case, we hope that you stay okay
every day.
Every day.